This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Car suicide bombers target a military base in Somalia's Adegle town. Mother and child return home after being cured of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Hong Kong's airport authority obtains a temporary court order to stop demonstrations. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also with me is Penina Karibe with business.
Thank you, Lindy. And coming up in Africa Live Business, investors cash in on World Bank bonds in response to the Ebola outbreak. And President Buhari bans issuance for forex to food importers in a bid to promote local production. I'll be back with details of those stories and plenty more in just a bit. For now, it's back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Penina. Well, we start the program in Somalia, where two suicide car bomb explosions occurred in the town of Adegle. Sources say the blast targeted a military base. Adegle was recently recaptured by AMISOM and Somali military forces from Al-Shabaab militants. The militant group was forced out of the capital, Mogadishu, in 2011 and has since lost most of its other strongholds. But it remains a threat, with fighters frequently carrying out bombings in Somalia and neighboring countries. We move on to some good news from the Democratic Republic of Congo. A mother and child have returned home after being cured of Ebola. The two were treated with the new drugs, which scientists say will boost survival rates by 90%.
Spitting blood, oozing blood, all the effects of Ebola. So sick when we brought him here. And tests were done. We confirmed it was Ebola.
But 42-year-old Esperance Nabitu Buhedwa and her 1.5-year-old son can breathe a sigh of relief as they receive certificates saying they have been cured completely of Ebola. The two were admitted for treatment on the 31st of July, the same day Esperance's infected husband died. No other family has tested positive for Ebola. Esperance and her son's case signals hope that experimental drugs REGNEB3 and MAB114 can cure Ebola.
Certainly it gives us some hope and optimism because prior to this, I mean, with the mortality of between 65 and 70%, it was a dreadful disease. If you can bring it down to a much lower level, that gives people a lot of hope and that gives them the confidence to go in to get care when they do get sick.
According to scientists, more than 90% of people can survive if they're treated early with these drugs. Ebola has ravaged eastern Congo since August 2018, killing at least 1,800 people. This trend will be reversed once health authorities manage to administer the now highly effective drugs to all patients infected with the viral disease in DR Congo. Chamhono, CGTN.
Meanwhile, the United Kingdom has reaffirmed its commitment to support South Sudan's health sector. This as Juba's government prepares the sector for the possibility of the spread of Ebola. The UK Minister for Africa is in South Sudan for a 3-day visit that ends on Wednesday. CGTN's Patrick Oyet has more.
South Sudan says it is scaling up prevention campaigns against the spread of Ebola as the virus continues to create havoc in the Democratic Republic of Congo. South Sudan's health ministry says an Ebola simulation exercise is scheduled for August 16th in the capital Juba and in the town of Nimule, which borders Uganda. Another town where a further exercise is expected to be carried out is Yei, which borders both Uganda and DRC. The health ministry says the exercise will test and validate areas' capabilities for early detection, rapid response and effective coordination in case of an Ebola outbreak at national, state or community levels. The UK's Minister for Africa says his country would continue to support the East African nation.
The UK has been a partner in the peace process, but also a partner working on education projects, health projects, working to ensure that South Sudan is prepared in case Ebola spreads from neighboring countries.
South Sudan, in collaboration with World Health Organization, is also vaccinating health workers stationed at border areas with the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda. South Sudan's government and aid workers say the country needs $12 million for preparations so that Ebola is properly managed if it spreads to the country. The government hopes support pledge such as that by the UK will go a long way in preparing the country's health sector to contain the virus if it spreads to South Sudan. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Italian Interior Minister Matteo Salvini said on Tuesday he's working to prevent 2 rescue ships operated by French and Spanish charities from bringing more than 500 migrants to Italy in the latest Mediterranean standoff. The Ocean Viking, which is run by the French NGO Doctors Without Borders and SOS Mediterranee, has picked up some 356 migrants off the coast of Libya since Friday, while Spanish boat Open Arms has saved some 160 people. Both vessels are in the central Mediterranean within easy sailing distance of the Italian island of Lampedusa. On Tuesday, a baby with a respiratory condition and the child's family were evacuated to Lampedusa from the Open Arms vessel, which is now demanding a safe port since it carried out a rescue operation 13 days ago. The UN Refugee Agency called on European governments to intervene, warning that storms were approaching. Now, Hong Kong's police pushed back hundreds of protesters who had gathered outside a police station in the residential area of Sham Shui Po in Kowloon on Wednesday evening. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's airport authority has obtained a temporary court order to stop people from unlawfully obstructing its operations. Demonstrators will only be allowed to stage protests in designated areas. Flights resumed briefly on Wednesday morning before dozens were once again delayed or cancelled for the rest of the day. Hong Kong police briefed the media earlier about last night's violence at the airport. A spokesperson called a number of allegations against the police inaccurate.
For one of the officers, he tried to arrest some of the protesters, but these people are completely out of mind. And they're besieging the officer and violently beaten the officer. And his baton is also snatched by the other protesters. And this officer have to withdraw the pistol to protect himself. I would like to point out, for his behavior is legal and it's the correct choice for the officer. And he was really brave and very restrained.
Staying in Hong Kong, a reporter from the Chinese mainland has been discharged from hospital after being attacked by protesters at Hong Kong airport on Tuesday night. Fu Guhao says he'd done nothing wrong to deserve such treatment.
During my stay in Hong Kong, I broke no rules or laws. I did nothing illegal or inappropriate. I didn't deserve such a violent attack.
Well, Fu sustained injuries from the attack. He was released from hospital with a bruise and scar on his face. He complained of a headache and body pains. Many Hong Kong residents gathered at the hospital to show their support. They held a banner with the slogan condemning the violence.
We are against violence. We need peace. Hong Kong needs harmony.
I feel anger and grief because I am a Hong Kong resident, and Hong Kong is the safest and most orderly place I know, but now even journalists are being beaten. They say they want freedom of speech, but why don't journalists have the freedom to report the news? They say they want to defend human rights, but why do neither journalists nor passengers have the right to enter or leave the airport?
Now, leaders of professional organizations and trade unions in Hong Kong have also expressed indignation. They have condemned protests and protesters who ignore the law and violate press freedom.
These protesters disrupted the airport's order, causing the cancellation of all flights. They expressed their so-called opinions by using violence. This cannot be allowed. not only in Hong Kong, but also the entire world. We must strongly condemn it.
It's really challenging the bottom line of humanity. Freedom of the press shouldn't be hampered. If the personal safety of journalists is threatened, how can the public's right to information be ensured?
It is unacceptable in Hong Kong to attack people. Travelers from all over the world may not choose to visit Hong Kong if they know their safety could be threatened at any time at the Hong Kong airport.
Well, as protests continue, all sorts of information is circulating online. It's become somewhat of a challenge to distinguish fact from fiction.
This is a poster at the Hong Kong International Airport. The police officer in the poster happened to have been attacked with laser pens after raising his gun as a warning sign. Protesters continue to express fear of the Hong Kong police, and many say they have decided to take actions to protect themselves. However, many have resorted to violence to a point that has been seen as overstepping the bottom line of a civilized society. Protesters have attacked the police. And even a reporter and a traveler. Violence is indisputable, and continued violence would only cause further damage to Hong Kong's stability. Until CGTN.
Now, let's just recap our top story this hour. Of course, that was Somalia, where two car bomb attacks, explosions rather, took place earlier today in the town of Adwegle. Now, this is a town south of the capital, Mogadishu, and was previously in the hands of Al-Shabaab, but was recaptured by AMISOM and Somali military forces. The explosions today left some casualties, but we're yet to find out the exact number. Let's bring you the very latest now on these events in Somalia. We're joined from Mogadishu by Abdul Qadir Sheikh Ade, a freelance journalist in the country. Abdul Qadir, thank you so much for joining us. Just give us an update. What more do we know so far from today's explosions?
Thank you. Today's explosion, it was not actually just an explosion, but it was a major attack carried out by Al-Shabaab. It started with a large explosion followed by heavy gunfire. And today's attack, Al-Shabaab were trying to recapture the city, which has recently been taken over from them by Somali government forces. There are casualties at the scene. Both sides, Somali government says that today's attack they killed a number of Al-Shabaab militants in Adwegle. They say that the number of deaths of Al-Shabaab is uncountable. They say a number of more than 50 Al-Shabaab soldiers have been killed there, and also the death from the casualties from the government side is very minimal compared to Al-Shabaab. They say that combination of number of deaths and injuries are only 3 people. But from the other side, Al-Shabaab say that they are claiming victory over the attack today. Abdulaziz Abu Musab, Al-Shabaab speaker, says that they killed over 50 Somali armed forces in the attack today. For the latest updates, the situation in Adwegle is very good. Somali government forces are controlling the scene, and they are making sure that the security is very good, and there has been no gunfire, no heavy gunfire or explosion is heard or reported from the scene so far now since the attack this morning.
Abdul Qadir, you mentioned, of course, that Al-Shabaab is trying to recapture this town. We heard just last week, in fact, that it was now in the hands of AMISOM and the Somali military forces. But does today's attack suggest that the militants still have some influence, still have some power over that town in being able to conduct such a brazen attack on a military base?
Al-Shabaab has been controlling the city for over 8 years, and they still control some very neighboring some very neighboring cities in Lower Shabelle, but they have no any control, and they have had no control since the Somali government, the forces had taken control over the city. For the last few days, since Al-Shabaab are controlling Mubarak and the Sham, which are very close or neighboring cities to the Oudegle, it's believed that they are taking the attack is from there, but they have no influence inside the city. And the government says that this attack, this seize of control of the Oudegle is just a part of continuous operation, which is intended to take a full control of all over the country, and they are on their way to taking over other cities in Lower Shabelle controlled by Al-Shabaab at the moment.
Well, thank you so much. That's Abdul Qadir Sheikh Ade joining us from Mogadishu, a freelance journalist in Somalia. And as he says there, the numbers of casualties still coming in, but government claiming that 50 Al-Shabaab militants were killed in the gunfire that followed the explosion. Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. A Malian innovator develops an app for people who can't read. And the cradle of mankind, we take you to Kenya's Turkana County, which is putting its cultural diversity on display this week.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start in Mali now, where an entrepreneur has created an app for people who can't read. It's called the Lenali Voice app, and it works with voice instructions in several languages spoken in the country. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala shows us how the app has helped small businesses market their goods and services.
In the streets of Mali's capital, Bamako, we find Ada Tembeli. She is amongst a growing number of entrepreneurs who are illiterate. Tembeli has now found a novel way to do business through social media. It's called the Lenali Vocal app. Tembeli attracts customers by sending a voice message with her stall's location.
Here are your lovely fruits. We have nice ripe oranges, apples, bananas, without forgetting to mention the pineapples. Today we have almost everything to keep you satisfied. To find us, go to the third bridge and you will see me.
The app allows her to take pictures of the fruits and vegetables she has available on the day. Tembeli says her earnings have tripled since she started using the app. Mali is a multilingual country, and the Lenali app translates most of them.
I installed it myself because Lenali has Bambara, Soninke, and almost all the languages. I haven't gone to school, and I don't understand French. This app is helpful because it uses my Bambara language.
Lenali was developed by IT engineer Mamadou Guro Sidibe. He wanted to create an application that could be used by people who could not read or write, as well as help those who needed to share information in French.
A lot of people get applications installed for them because they cannot do it themselves. So, it is with that in mind that we created vocal guides and vocal instructions in the local language so people can understand what they are doing. If you know how to write, you can put it in writing, and if not, you can speak into the application and record it, and after that, you can publish vocally, you can comment vocally, and really, you can do everything in this application without ever having to write a single word.
According to the United Nations, only 33% of Malians are literate. Before the application, most small business owners in Mali relied on friends, family, and word of mouth to keep them going.
Since I started using Lenali, my turnover has gone up by 5%, and now I can sell 20 motorbikes a day, whereas before I was hardworking but just selling 5 a day.
Lenali has become popular in the country. The free app has been available since January 2017. It has over 70,000 users. Its developer expects it to be profitable when it reaches 200,000 users. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Now, here in Kenya, the annual Lake Turkana Cultural Festival kicks off in just a matter of hours. Local and foreign tourists arrived in Turkana in northern Kenya earlier to be part of the event that will run until Saturday. The festival seeks to showcase the Turkana community's rich cultural heritage, and it features music, dance, art, food, and rituals. It is one of Kenya's biggest cultural events and tourist attractions, and often draws in communities from neighboring Ethiopia, Uganda, and South Sudan, who are all related to Kenya's Turkana people. Now, Kenya's Turkana region has also been central in the study of the history of mankind. In the last few decades, archaeologists have discovered fossils of some of the earliest human ancestors in the Turkana Basin. The findings have fueled the belief that Africa is the cradle of mankind, where all humanity began. As Turkana showcases its cultural diversity this week, we take you on an exploration into the origins of mankind.
In a research facility buried deep in Kenya's vast Turkana Basin, scientists brush away particles of dust from bones. It's hard, painstaking work, but with time, the layers of dust melt away to reveal the treasures beneath. These are human fossils, the remains of mankind buried deep in the ground, some for millions of years. The fossils reveal different things about ancient man. The oldest ones show how mankind evolved when he discovered fire and started to cook, or when he began to make stone weapons. This is Dr. Richard Leakey's life's work, a passion passed down through his family. Leakey, a renowned Kenyan paleoanthropologist, discovered several fossils early in his career. While several remains have been discovered in other parts of Kenya, he focused his study on the semi-arid Turkana region.
In Turkana, you've got an extraordinary opportunity to find things, because as the Rift Valley formed around the lake, and the lake is sitting in the bottom of it, various strata have been exposed that have produced fossil record of animals, of plants, and of climate, as well as early humans. And the early human remains from Turkana span a period from about 4.5 million years to the present time. And there's no other place we know of in Africa or the world where the record for human origins is so complete.
Though Ethiopia also has some of very important finds, in terms of number, like we have over 400, I'm talking of 400 specimens, hominid specimens that have been discovered in this part of the world.
Once cleaned and identified, the originals are moved for safekeeping at the National Museum in the capital, Nairobi. Casts of previous findings remain in the cupboard. Kamoya Kimeo, a member of Leakey's team, discovered the Turkana boy skeleton in 1984. It is the nearly complete skeleton of a boy aged between 9 and 12, believed to have lived 1.6 million years ago. Such findings reinforce Leakey's belief that Africa is the cradle of mankind.
What I think now is clear that irrespective of where you're from, or where you think you're from, whether you're Chinese or Indian or Brazilian or from South America or from the Arctic Circle, the Inuit, everybody has a genetic code that shows they came from Africa.
While Turkana may not necessarily be the only or even the earliest cradle of mankind, the abundance of fossils discovered here has led scientists to postulate that mankind began life here and then fanned out across the world. Now in his 70s, Liki has stepped back, leaving a team that includes his daughter to continue his work. They give lessons to university students who may one day take over. This work matters. In this remote corner of Kenya, they are digging and preserving mankind's history. Bulkisa Nyabwa, CGTN, Turkana, Kenya.
Eritrea has one of the highest immigration rates in Africa, with a large diaspora residing abroad. Now, many have found success abroad in various sectors, but thanks to recent positive developments in Eritrea and the region, some are returning home to serve their communities. CGTN's Gurum Chala has more.
Thomas Asfaselase is one of Eritrea's young diaspora residing in the United States. For long, he hasn't been back home, but was sending the hard-earned cash to his parents.
Things here cost so much that you need help from the outside. And, you know, a lot of the people that live outside of Eritrea were either born here or grew up here. And so we have a lot of family here. I have a lot of uncles and aunts, and my grandparents are here. So, I mean, sending money back home is one means of supporting them in the way that they need.
Thomas, who is a medical doctor by profession, however, felt he needed to do more than sending money here, and he took the most important steps.
I actually am here working with the Ministry of Health because I started a nonprofit in America to send supplies to countries that need them, and my organization is called Supply the Change. And so we've managed to send about $2.5 million worth of supplies here. So I think outside of money, people need to start looking at ways that they can come back to the country and contribute outside of the monetary gains, right? So if I come back as a doctor and work in the hospitals for a few months and, let's say, do a few procedures for free, that's one way of giving back.
Although there is no accurate data of the number of Eritreans in the diaspora today, it is estimated that hundreds of thousands of them are settled in Europe, North America and Australia before and after independence. With the return of peace with Ethiopia at the moment, more are looking at opportunities at home.
Eritrea can contribute to its people and in Africa as a whole, economically and politically. So I'm hoping there are many professionals and then also as well as academicians who are ready to come to Eritrea, not only sending money but to serve mentally, physically and also professionally.
Thomas, however, wants to see some improvements to be made in his country to encourage fellow diaspora to give back more.
Moving forward, one of the best things that can happen in this country is, one, like a structured situation where if people from back home want to come back and volunteer, they know where to go rather than just talking to random people. And two, transparency between each different entity of government. So like the Ministry of Health talking to the Ministry of Education and having the dialogue between them so when we come, it's not just like starting brand new. So I think moving forward, that's kind of one of the biggest things that I would like to see my country make.
Eritrea's government is working to develop the mining sector, and there are encouraging results, for instance, in the gold mining sector. But it is the Eritrean diaspora which is majorly supporting the economy of this country. Eritreans abroad are the main and sustainable source of hard currency. Many say more and quick work needs to be done to see a booming economy soon. Grumjara CGTN, Asmara, Eritrea.
And let's now go to Panina for your latest business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Business.
Investors cash in on World Bank loans in response to the Ebola outbreak. And President Buhari bans the issuance for forex to food importers in a bid to promote local production.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
As more countries focus on domestic issues and the number of governments willing to respond urgently to disease outbreaks abroad wanes, the need for sources of emergency funds is increasing. Catastrophe bonds pay some of the highest coupons in the fixed income world and mostly attract specialist fund managers. And the World Bank issued pandemic bonds for Ebola. Alexandria Majala has more.
The deadly Ebola outbreak in Africa is highlighting shortcomings of so-called pandemic bonds in halting contagions. In its wake, a new way of financing the fight against global diseases has lured investors with annual returns of more than 11%. 2 years ago, after the worst Ebola outbreak on record, the World Bank, under a program called the Pandemic Emergency Financing Facility, began selling high-yielding securities. The lender modeled them on catastrophe bonds that pay out in response to insurance claims for events like hurricanes. The pandemic bonds, the first ever, are triggered by patterns in death from infectious diseases. For example, a $95 million tranche insuring against an Ebola virus outbreak pays investors more than $1 million each month. Critics say the bond's complicated triggering mechanism slows its ability to stem infectious contagions. For the funds to flow to Congo, the disease must cause at least 20 deaths in at least one other country within a specified time window. Deaths must also increase at a minimum rate during this period. The World Bank, however, says the bonds are part of an innovative financing mechanism designed to provide early, rapid funding to combat major disease outbreaks. Due in July 2020, the issue was a bondholder's dream, offering returns found only in shaky junk-rated bonds sold from the best credit in the world and with a payout formula that was hard to trigger. According to the World Bank, the transaction was 200% oversubscribed. The premiums for the bonds, one of 11.5%, the other 6.9%, cost about $36 million a year and is paid by donor countries, including Germany and Japan. For poor countries, the facility is a source of grant funding for an outbreak for which the beneficiaries do not pay any premiums. The World Bank has made other funds available to respond to Ebola, including $300 million in grants and loans offered in July. However, the World Health Organization and its partners still need $287 million for public health operations in Congo. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has issued a directive to the country's central bank not to provide foreign exchange for the importation of food. The head of state says his administration has achieved food security as the government works to bolster agricultural production. He adds that the country's foreign reserves will be used strictly for the diversification of the economy. Some states, including Kebbi, Ogun, Lagos, Jigawa, Ebonyi and Kano, are alleged to have taken advantage of the federal government's policy on agriculture with huge returns in rice farming. British American Tobacco's proposed takeover of e-cigarette maker Twisp has won approval from South Africa's Competition Tribunal. In 2017, the firm announced the deal as part of its efforts to increase its offering of alternatives to smoking cigarettes. However, the strategy faced opposition from the Competition Commission, which recommended the prohibition of the deal. The agreement between the two companies has now been set on a series of conditions, including product allocation of not more than 70% of visible sales space by retailers. Moreover, there will be no job cuts as a result of the proposed deal for a period of 2 years upon completion of the merger. China's economy has maintained steady momentum midway through the third quarter, but will it be enough? Signs of downward pressure are being seen in China's latest economic data. CGTN's reporter Wang Mengjian has more.
6 weeks into the second half of this year, China's national economy continues performing within a reasonable range, yet growth has slowed in certain areas. In July, the index of services production rose 6.3% year-on-year, 0.8 percentage points lower than in the previous month. Industrial production slowed as well, as the total value of industrial enterprises was up just 4.8% year-on-year. And the growth rate for total retail sales of consumer goods also reported a 2.2 percentage point drop from the June figure. However, the nation's foreign trade stood out, turning in a more than 2 percentage point growth over June.
Despite mounting economic downward pressure at home and a grave external environment, we are still seeing growth in modern service industries and high-tech manufacturing. At the same time, the export growth expanded as we continue to diversify global trading markets and optimize our trade structure. Generally speaking, the economy is maintaining its growth momentum.
One underlying concern from some is the slower growth in retail sales of consumer goods in July.
The main reason behind the more than 2% decline of the country's automobile retail sales in July was due to the large-scale sales promotion for vehicles in June, but the majority of the other sectors enjoyed faster growth, especially in the catering business amid the nation's booming nightlife economy. And our online retail sales also grew steadily. Looking ahead, great potential in consumption still remains.
Another key index in July's economic data is increasing consumer prices in food sectors like the pork and agricultural products. Liu says authorities have launched multiple measures to adjust the imbalance between supply and demand, but it still takes time. Referring to how the ongoing China-US trade tension could impact the economy, Liu Aihua said China is still capable of resisting external pressure by making the best of its domestic policies to further release the market vitality. Wang Mengzhen, CGTN, Beijing.
Despite the brief reprieve on tariffs, Washington and Beijing are still at odds over Huawei. President Donald Trump said he would not do any business with the Chinese telecommunications giant, but he did leave the door open to future business if and when the trade war ends. CGTN's Jim Spellman has more.
A new rule prohibits the U.S. government from buying telecommunications and video surveillance products from 5 Chinese firms, including Huawei and ZTE. The U.S. claims Huawei and other Chinese firms could share user data with the Chinese government or even launch hacking attacks on U.S. networks. Huawei and the other companies deny any wrongdoing. The U.S. has provided no evidence of any risk. There won't be much immediate impact. These firms have little involvement in U.S. government contracting. Concerns about Huawei date back to the Obama administration, but President Trump has sometimes portrayed Huawei as a national security issue and at other times as a trade issue.
It's much simpler not to do any business with Huawei, so we're not doing business with Huawei. That doesn't mean we won't agree to something if and when we make a trade deal.
Huawei also faces a separate ban on purchasing U.S. components or software used in its smartphones. Huawei is pushing back, suing the U.S. government and rolling out a new operating system that could replace Google's Android OS if needed. Despite headwinds from the U.S., Huawei reports strong growth in the first half of 2019, but acknowledges more risk ahead.
Our business result for the first half was quite good, and we achieved a stable growth. But objectively, we are facing many difficulties. In the second half and next year, these difficulties are quite challenging.
Perhaps no wall has more infamy than the Berlin Wall.
Huawei has released this video warning that trade disputes could create a digital Berlin Wall, a technological and economic divide between countries aligned with China and those aligned with the U.S.
We must learn from history. No more walls in terms of trade. No more walls in terms of technology. This world needs an integrated global ecosystem that can help us promote faster technological innovation and stronger economic growth.
Meantime, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton traveled to London to meet with the representatives of Boris Johnson's new government, hoping to convince the UK to join the U.S. in blocking Huawei. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
On to India now. The fashion industry has a reputation of favoring short-term trends and throwaway products, but designers in India are championing hand-loomed fabrics, and they say each fabric is a heritage. Moreover, the revival of traditional weaving is helping employ local communities. Take a look.
Indian designer Urvash Kaur started working with hand-woven fabric 10 years ago. Now she's among those who are trying to convince the fashion industry that each fabric has an individual history.
It tells a story. There is a story about everyone that has been a part of that process till the garment. You know, it's like every person puts in a little bit of themselves into that.
This catwalk show is an example of how the heritage of a fabric is dictating fashion in India. Over the last decade, more and more Indian designers have started using hand-woven fabric. The revival of the tradition helps support communities of weavers, especially for women.
Women who were in a family relationship with unreliable men for alcohol reasons or other reasons, health reasons. It gave them their ability to actually support the household, and thereby their kids were educated.
Indian handloomers weaved more than 5 billion square meters of fabric in 2018, according to Indian Ministry of Textiles. The industry accounts for 15% of all the fabric production in the country and provides employment to more than 4.3 million people. Indian weavers also contributed to 95% of all hand-woven fabric in the world. Misha Vandenberg, CGTN.
And that's it for now. Bad ahead on global business. President Buhari restricts food imports to protect local producers. We assess the impact of that directive. We'll be live in Lagos for more details. That's at the top of the hour, and I shall see you then. For now, it's back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Panina. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, a female artist is shaking up the Nigerian music scene with her soft rock sound.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice. Nigeria is undoubtedly the home of Afro-pop music on the continent, with many of its artists currently dominating Africa's entertainment industry. But one fast-rising female artist is seeking to create a space for soft rock in the country. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with her story.
She is the emerging face of soft rock music in Nigeria. Zainab Sule is on her way to becoming the next big music star in a country where many of them abound. In a society where Afropop is king and the dominant tune, Zainab is pushing through her genre of music and devising strategies to create a market for it across Nigeria.
So what I did was decide that, okay, if there's no market for this thing, I will get it. And since alternative music and rock music is not as popular as this, we decided, okay, let's do our own show. So we started that, and then we did it like 3 years, back-to-back rock shows, and they were good. So now I said, you can solve this problem by creating a niche. And then we started these rock shows that I now do.
Through her show, she's now winning over fans to her kind of music. Her songs are inspiring and in most cases reflect happenings in her society.
Her content, her lyrics are deep, talking about love, talking about the issues of life, talking about the things that borders the society.
When I was really small, my dad used to play Don Williams, Kenny Rogers, Dolly Parton. Yes, those really country music. And from when I was very, very young, so naturally I gravitated towards that, and I knew I wanted to do music.
Zainab is one of the most sought-after rock music artists in the country today and has done a number of shows even outside the shores of Nigeria.
We got an email in January saying that I've been selected to attend the Deep Elm Arts Festival in US. And I'm like, how? And it was really nice. So I think for me, that has been my best achievement so far.
Not signed to any record label, Zainab funds a music project all by herself and thinks that's the best way to go for emerging artists.
So I have a side hustle that I do so that I can fund my music. So that really, really helps. Because music is like seasonal. Some days you have shows back to back, you will lose your voice. Like I've lost my voice now. But some days you don't have a show for like 2 months and you're hungry. So it's really, really, really necessary that you have something that you're doing.
The kiss to my heart, baby, just drive.
She's certainly not yet the finished article, but Zainab's star is beginning to shine bright, and it's only a matter of time before she actually becomes Nigeria's queen of soft rock. DJ Batman, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And here's what's coming up in your sports news up next. Top African players impress at the ITTF Challenge in Nigeria.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Africa's top-ranked table tennis player Aruna Quadri has bounced back from his shock semi-final exit at the Africa Cup to capture the 2019 International Table Tennis Challenge Nigeria Open title. The tournament attracted over 170 players from around the world. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam has more.
It's down to the finals in the Nigeria Open of the ITTF Challenge Plus after days of intense battle involving 171 players. The players, made up of 105 men and 66 women, are all jostling for a win in the singles and doubles category. In the men's singles, Nigeria's top seed, Aruna Quadri, defeated his Austrian counterpart, Robert Gardos. Quadri won 4 out of 6 sets to retain his title for the 3rd consecutive time.
It means a lot to me. I think the victory belongs to all the Nigerian players, all the Nigerians and everyone here who came here in large number, giving me support, motivating me. So I think all this title belongs to almost all of them. We have done it again just like we did it last year, and it was a collective effort, not just with my power, but by God's grace and everyone here.
For me it was really hard to play. I think
if I win the first set, I had some touch ball. I was leading, and if I win this, then maybe he didn't get this confidence for the rest of the game. But I have to say he was better. He deserved to win, and just congratulations for him.
And in the women's category, Russia's Polina Mikhailiova clinched the trophy for the second time since 2012.
This is amazing. I still cannot believe, because I was sometimes semi-finalist or runner-up, but never a winner. So of course it means a lot and much, and I hope to continue the same way.
In the singles category, the winners were awarded $7,000 and the runners-up $3,500. And in the doubles, the winners went home with $3,000. Now top players will be jostling for a spot at the Olympic Games in Tokyo next year. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
The Kenya women's national volleyball team will head to the 2019 African Games as defending champions. Following their Africa Volleyball Championship loss in the final to Cameroon in July, the Malkia Strikers of Kenya will go into Morocco aiming to prove their worth. CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar reports.
The Kenya women's volleyball team is being put through their paces ahead of the 2019 African Games. The Malkia Strikers have just come from playing in the Volleyball Intercontinental Olympic qualifiers in Italy, and before that played through to the final in the Africa Women Volleyball Championship in Egypt.
We've had a lot of games from the beginning of this year, and yes, it's taking a toll on us physically. But I'm glad we have so much depth in our squad. Everyone in this team is capable of doing the job. So that has allowed us to rotate as some players recover.
Going into the African Games, every team in the continent will be looking to dethrone the defending champions.
If you are the defending champion, there's always that pressure, and we are well aware of that. Other teams will have nothing to lose when they come up against us. So for us, we really have to be well prepared and make sure we bring home our title.
Kenya, who lost in the final of the African Championship to Cameroon last month, will renew its rivalry with the West Africans in Morocco after landing in the same group of the competition.
I cherish to play Cameroon one more time because I was not convinced that they beat us in Cairo. It was very close with a difference of 2 points, and that is what we want to recover. And being in the same group and also being in a very tough group gives us the motivation to fight from the first match. And I think it's a group of death with 4 top teams in Africa running the same group. But our intention is to come out as winners and possibly play Cameroon twice in the group and also in the finals, because we also want to prove a point.
Kenya's campaign at the recently concluded Women's African Volleyball Championship might have ended on a bitter note, but as you can see, the Malkia Strikers have since then intensified their preparations for the upcoming 2019 African Games in Morocco, and are very confident they will defend their title at the continent's multi-sport event. Mohammed Abubakar for CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.